Audio Jungle.
Federal legislators, yes?
Senate, yes. We only have two with us tonight so far. I don't know.
Attorney General and Marquita Bradshaw, right?
Yes. Those are
the two who are present with us right now?
correct.
Okay, I'm going to go back over because they weren't present in the beginning, so that's okay. I'm going to just go over a couple of things in Miss Bradshaw. Do you have a title that you would prefer for me to call you, Miss Bradshaw?
Please unmute.
Okay.
Okay, there she is.
Marquita Bradshaw is just fine.
Yes, ma'am. And Attorney Kimbrough, would you like for me to refer you? Is that okay to refer to you in that manner?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much again to you as well for showing up on this evening. We appreciate you. It's, again, a lot of people that may run but don't want to take the time for this. So we appreciate those that do show up, because a lot of people just don't take the time to show up to these very important meetings, because they are important for you to get your point across and for us to hear what you have to say and help us decide who's the best candidate, the best person for the position. So on tonight, I will give each of you 2 minutes to first introduce yourself, and then I will ask you questions, one after the other, one behind the other. You have 1 to 2 minutes to respond to the question. Again, I ask that you maintain a level of respect for one another, and I've heard both of you speak, and you are very respectful women, so I appreciate. We just got a golden troops on tonight, so thank y'all. So again, just for you guys to be respectful as well to one another. So if you have anything, I'm going to start with Ms. Bradshaw. You're unmuted, so I'm going to start with you, and just take 2 minutes to introduce yourself. And I'm going to pause in between Ms. Bradshaw and Attorney Kimbrough just to see if anyone else has shown up that is running for this seat as well.
Mr. Mackler is here.
Pardon me?
Mr. Mackler.
Hi, Mr. Mackler. Yes, I see him. Okay, excuse me. All right, Ms. Bradshaw, you have 2 minutes to do your introduction and state your question.
Thank you, Clarksville NAACP, for putting this together. My name is Marquita Bradshaw. I grew up in South Memphis where everything was in walking distance. My neighborhood school, my brothers and my sisters and I, we used to just walk across the street to school. Also in our neighborhood was a military landfill. It made people sick and die. And that was my introduction and coming into the political process beyond voting. We had to do something. We couldn't be silent. Environmental racism was happening in our community, and we had to do something about it. We had to make allowances for our representatives did not know how to represent us because they had never dealt with a military contaminated community before. And so we had to hold them accountable and then seek transparency on why environmental laws were not being enforced the same way in my neighborhood. So knocking door to door in my neighborhood, organizing grew into a career where I became an international organizer. And now I'm here today because hardworking families, they have a right to have healthy and safe communities where they live, learn, work, worship, and recreate. And we do this by building up the 3 pillars of education, an environment with a just transition away from pollution, and an economy that works for hardworking families. You can go to my website, marquitabradshaw.com, to learn more about our platforms, because I've been listening to voters across Tennessee to put this platform together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is there anyone that's shown up after Mr. Mackler?
No.
Mr. Mackler, is it okay for me to call you that, or would you like for me to address you by title? I can't hear you.
Call me James, please.
Okay. I'm going to try. That's going to be hard.
If you're more comfortable, you do what makes you comfortable, but I'm fine with James.
Okay. Attorney Kimbrough, Get 2 minutes to introduce yourself and just state your platform, please, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Robin Kimbrough Hayes, and I'm running to be your next United States Senator. I'm a lawyer and a chaplain. I can handle the job. As a lawyer, I've argued cases all across the state of Tennessee. I've drafted legislation and written policy. I grew up in a trailer park in Lexington, Kentucky, and it was rough. Some trailer parks are bad and some are good. Mine was bad. But the trailer park taught me how to make a lot out of a little, stretch resources, and gave me the drive to get an education. I went to Fisk University in Nashville and Emory School of Law in Atlanta. I practiced law in the public sector as an assistant attorney general for the Tennessee State Attorney General's Office, associate general counsel for the Department of Children's Services, and I spent 10 wonderful years working for the Tennessee Coalition to end domestic and sexual violence. During my time in college and during my time as Assistant Attorney General working for DCS and the Tennessee Coalition, I was still a very active member with the NAACP. I'm very active with social justice work, and I'm carrying this on into my run for the United States Senate. For many years, I was a single mother. I had to pay out-of-pocket health care premiums for my 2 dependent children, almost $300 for my son's medication. I picked up a 3rd job to cover these expenses. No one should have to work themselves to death to live. This is why I'm running to be your United States Senator, because I want to change the culture of our nation from where the rich get rich and the poor get poor and sicker. As your United States Senator, I'm going to take back our democracy. I'm going to take back our rule of law and give power to the people. I'm going to fight for Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, criminal justice reform, equal pay for equal work, expansion of the Violence Against Women's Act. And I'm going to take the same fight that got me from the trailer park in Kentucky to the courtrooms in Tennessee to Washington, D.C. as your next United States Senator. I'm asking that you vote for me right now, or early voting beginning July 17th, and especially on August 6th, to be your United States Senator. Passion for Tennessee.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kimbrough. Appreciate you. Mr. Mackler, unmute yourself, please, sir. There you go. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, I'm not sure what's going on here. Hang on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Well, thank you for having me here tonight. This is an important moment, and I want to start by acknowledging the murder of so many Black Americans and the systemic racism that's gotten us to this point. We can do better. We must do better. And we need people in the United States Senate who will say that Black lives do matter so we can begin to have the discussions we need to heal these difficult wounds. On this, and in so many ways, Washington is failing Tennessee. I launched my campaign in front of a closed rural hospital in McKenzie. Since then, 3 more rural hospitals have closed, and Tennessee now leads the nation in closed rural hospitals per person. The opioid epidemic is ravaging our communities. There's no national solution. People aren't even talking about that anymore. And the trade war hurts Tennessee's economy more than any other state. You add in COVID-19, there's a perfect storm gathering in Tennessee. People want change. Throughout my life, I've chosen service. After we were attacked on 9/11, I closed my law practice. I joined the U.S. Army to do more in a time of crisis. I learned to fly Black Hawk helicopters and did that in Iraq with the 101st Airborne Division. When I came back, I became a JAG officer. I worked to protect the survivors of military sexual assault and prosecute criminals. When I got out of the Army, I joined a large law firm, but made sure that I always had time to work for the Federal Public Defender's Office, representing indigent clients caught up in a criminal justice system, which all too often is not just. I'm running for the U.S. Senate for the same reason I joined the Army, to step forward and serve in a time of crisis. I'm an outsider. I'm a veteran. I'm a person of faith. I'm a different kind of candidate. I know we are not going to solve our nation's problems with our leaders tweeting insults, with them denying the existential threat of climate change, busy looking for their next infusion of secret corporate cash, and ignoring the needs of the people they're elected to serve. I want to raise my children in a country where a hard day's work earns a living wage, where public education is a pathway to opportunity, where access to healthcare is a right, and where access to women's healthcare is a right, where we're all free to live, love, speak, and pray as we choose. And I look forward to the conversation tonight. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you again, all three of you. We really appreciate you on this evening. So I'm going to start the way my screen looks, okay? It's from Miss Kimbrough to Miss Bradshaw to Mr. Mackler, but it won't stay that way, okay? So, but just this first question to Miss Kimbrough. The state of our country is we have so much calamity going on. There's so many different things going on between COVID-19, race relations, disparities. So Attorney Kimbrough, tell me, what are your top priorities for improving race relations between law enforcement and minorities? Your sound, ma'am.
Just as I stated at the summit in Clarksville a few weeks ago, if I were your United States Senator today, I would support the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. This is a piece of legislation that has already passed in the Congress and now is sitting on the Senate floor. Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker have signed on to this legislation, and I would support it with them. I would also add that every municipality would be required to have a community oversight board. I would also require provision in the Justice and Policing Act that non-compliance with the act would result in a loss of cops and burn money. The Justice and Policing Act is important because it gets rid of the qualified immunity doctrine, which has protected police officers and resulted in the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks. And this needs to stop.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw, did you need me to repeat the question? Your volume? What I'm going to ask is that the three of you who are going to be asked the questions, if you don't have any major background, anything in your background, you can leave your mics unmuted.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Ms. Bradshaw?
I can. No need to repeat the question. I was just on mute. All right. You know, it was racism that brought me into the political system and the environment. And when I'm running on an environmental justice platform, which is also a legal term, and it concerns how a person interacts with their political environment, their physical environmental environment, the educational environment, and the social and economic environment, how all of those are intertwined together. And policing has to change as we know it, because it's not working. It's not decreasing crime. And the system is broken with so many disparities when it comes to arresting, incarceration, sentencing, and people are left out of the economic system. We should be moving toward a restorative justice and a transformative model of community policing, where we change how we police and move towards a service-based model. That's the reason why I signed the Justice Guarantee Act proposed by Anna Presley, to put in different measures, not only to deal with what's going on in the criminal justice system, but also looking at creating free car optional societies where poor people can participate more in society. You can go read more on my website, marquitabradshaw.com.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Mackler, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Please.
What are your top priorities for improving racial relations between law enforcement and minorities?
Changes in policing are long overdue. The president's executive order on policing, it doesn't go nearly far enough. We need real reforms that need to be codified into law, which is why I support the Justice and Policing Act that has been brought forward by the Congressional Black Caucus and passed the House. The Justice and Policing Act, it addresses a lot of the things we need to talk about. It bans chokeholds and no-knock warrants at the federal level. It bans racial and religious profiling, requires that we track the use of force both on race and other data, limits the transfer of military-style weapons to police departments. It creates more accountability, and it creates standardized training across the 18,000 different law enforcement agencies in this country. Now, I'm a pilot and I'm a lawyer, and I know that I have to take recurring annual training to make sure that I know what the current standards are, what the current laws are, that I'm up to speed on everything that I need to know. I would have added that to the Justice and Policing Act. I think that's a critical component. Whatever we do, we cannot allow the Justice and Policing Act to get stuck on Mitch McConnell's desk of inaction like so many other important bills, because police reform is long overdue.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to stick with you, Mr. Mackler, for this next question.
Great.
What bills would you sponsor or support that address these judicial injustices that are happening?
Of course, we've talked about the Justice and Policing Act, which I absolutely support. Throwing millions of people in jail isn't going to fix our problems. We have to make sure that violent criminals who continue to pose a threat to our community are kept behind bars, but that does not describe most people in our prison system today. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, and with for-profit prisons operating here in Tennessee, there's a profit motive for putting people behind jail. There should never be a profit motive for putting people in jail. That's wrong. We need to ban for-profit prisons. Now, I've worked in the military justice system and in the federal criminal justice system as a member of the Federal Public Defender Panel. And I'll say the First Step Act, signed into law by the president, was a good first step. It reduced one of my clients' flawed mandatory minimums from 35 years to less than 10 years. That's the difference between, watching his kids grow up and never even knowing them. But there's lots more that needs to be done. We need to continue to work on criminal justice reform. We need to find alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders, help reduce recidivism, and update those flawed sentencing laws. Well before my clients got to me, our system had failed them at so many levels. And we need to address all of those areas of systemic racism because they all impact criminal justice. Ultimately, our criminal justice system needs to be about justice for victims and getting offenders back on the right track to becoming productive members of society.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ms. Bradshaw.
When you look at what needs to happen in the criminal justice system, it needs to move to a restorative justice. And we hear about the opioid crisis, but when the faces look different, when it was crack cocaine was the face of addiction, nobody sounded any alarms. And so that's the reason why we have such a problem with the opioid crisis today, because the infrastructure was not set up when it happened in the Black community. When we look at prisons, they should not be privatized, nor should probational services be privatized. That is the problem. We cannot make it profitable for people not to get rehabilitated. There has to be a pathway to being restored. We need to have physical and mental health services for those living with addiction and address the disparities of longer sentences and the extended populations. And with extended probations, I had a client that I was trying to sell life insurance to one time where he had a probation of 25 years. And he served 1 year in prison from when he was addicted. And so what we're seeing now is systemic, what's been running rampant in our communities. And we have to move towards solutions where we end the profits that's happening in the prison, where you have a person who can't get a job on the outside, but when they go inside a prison, there's a major corporation that's making a lot of money off of them because of slave labor. We have to revamp what our criminal justice system looks like and move towards a more service-based model. You can go online to look more about the steps that we can implement to change our system to a transformative justice system and not where you send people to learn how to be more of a criminal.
Thank you very much, Attorney Kimbrough.
Are you asking what legislation should be passed in addition to the Justice and Policing Act to break
if you supported one, or if you, for instance, if you had to support one or sponsor one, would you address that? Yes, ma'am.
Again, I would support the Justice and Policing Act, and I would add more teeth to that act, especially when it comes to burn and cops money. So burn and cops money fund law enforcement. And there's already a mechanism now if police officers conduct a lie detector test on a sexual assault victim, they can lose burn and cops money. I think this should happen exactly when we're dealing with police misconduct. So I would add that to the bill. I would also add that we need to make sure that prisons, again, like as the other candidates have said, are deprivatized. We need to legalize marijuana, which is the arrests on marijuana are inherently, most of them are inherently racist, and there are many brown and black people serving lengthy sentences for marijuana charges. Also, I would support the Equality Act. The Equality Act secures rights for the LGBTQ community. I attended a vigil last week, a few weeks ago, and another one on the day before yesterday. The first vigil, there were only 12 trans people that were killed by transphobia violence, and now 4 additional people have been killed. So we need to address this issue of equality, systemic racism, systemic oppression in all communities. And that's what I would do as your United States Senator, because I believe that when we break the bonds of systemic racism, we can also free other marginalized communities.
Thank you very much. So the next question for Mr. Macker, I'm going to start with you again on this one. This is something I've posed before, and so we're going to continue to ask this question, not until we get the answer that we want, but until we can truly understand what the candidate is trying to say. So will you support legislation that prohibits felon voters' rights from being taken away?
I think I'm understanding your question. I'm not sure why you're having so much difficulty getting an answer to it. I believe that this is a society where we believe in second chances. As I mentioned, we need a criminal justice system that protects victims and then puts people back on the path to becoming productive members of society. Our system works best when people are able to vote, to participate, and to have their voices heard. And that means people with diverse experiences, people who have done wrong and have been rehabilitated. Although there may be some exceptions to this, and I'd be willing to have those discussions, once someone has served their debt to society, they should become fully functioning members of our democracy.
Okay, Ms. Bradshaw?
Look, we count people when we do appropriations, and everybody is counted. To have representation, to have no representation when you're counted for a society, when it starts dividing up resources, that is a disparity. And that's what's happening to a whole population of people who have been incarcerated, is that they are not able to participate in the democratic process. And that's unacceptable in a democratic society. We are a republic built on democratic values. So when a person has re-entered society, they should be able to fully function in our democracy, in the economic system, and the educational system. Far too many people are stuck because they cannot move forward because of how they are labeled forever as a felon. People are people, and we need to be able to give them a pathway towards restoration.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kimbrough, Attorney Kimbrough, excuse me.
That's fine. Robin is good too. Thank you. I agree with the other candidates. I believe that once someone has served their sentence, they should fully be able to participate in the democratic process. I believe that denying persons who have committed felonies or have felonies on their record should have the right to vote. This is another example of voter suppression. And unfortunately, most of these folks who are not allowed to vote because of their felonious record, they are black and brown, and they're poor people. I talked to a constituent in Claiborne County, and her son cannot vote because he has a felony on his record. And let me tell you, I have worked hard with this constituent to try to find her resources in Upper East Tennessee that will help with expungement of this felony on the record so that he can submit an application so he can vote. This should not be in our society, which we pledge liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. So the next question is very simple. I'm going to lighten the load a little bit. So, for Ms. Bradshaw, what is the importance of the filling out the 2020 sentence to you?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the question clearly. You're going in and out.
I'm sorry. What is the importance of filling out a 2020 census to you?
The 2020 census is so important because, first of all, it's tied to redistricting, which means that people will have representation based on how they fill out the census. Not only that, but resources are divided up by how many people fill out that census. So when people fill out the census, it's like putting money on the table for your schools, your roads, your small business incubators, just money for everything in your community to make it healthy and safe. Everything that a person would want in their community. When you go through the roads of Tennessee, you see that some places are boarded up and Main Street is suffering. And this is a way to be able to put money back in communities through CDCs and through nonprofits and through making sure the hospitals are built. The census is so important because it's going to shape our lives for the next 10 years. So don't leave money on the table for your city, for your community, your state. Fill out your census today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Attorney Kimbrough.
The census is very important because we all need to be counted here in the United States for funding purposes and gerrymandering. Our state is cut up in so many ways. And because of that, it's very difficult to elect people who will represent the needs and values of the people of Tennessee. This is why it's so important that everyone complete the census. It also means that it also means money for free lunch programs, improved schools, and safe access to schools. No one should have to think about moving to a different zip code so they can have a safe environment or a better educational opportunities because of that. Everyone should be able to have access no matter where you live. So this is why it's so important that we complete the census so that we can be counted, so we can get the resources we deserve and the representation that will move us forward as a state and as a country.
Thank you. Mr. Mackler.
When the census form arrived at my house several weeks ago, my wife and I sat our kids down with us. Our little girls are 9 and 10 years old. We logged on, we answered our census questions, and we explained to them the importance of what we were doing, that we were making sure that every single one of us was counted and making sure that all of our communities get the representation and the resources they need, because people need to be counted. And we live in the tyranny of a gerrymandered majority here in this state. And the result of that is that we wind up with extreme bans on women's health care, on bills that undermine our public education system and our healthcare system, and a whole lot of Tennesseans wondering what happened to their state.
Thank you very much. There's been some questions. I can't read the whole thing. Are you able to see the questions, Attorney Mackler and Attorney Kimbrough and Ms. Bradshaw?
Yeah.
There was one directed directly to you, Mr. Mackler. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it. Yes. So do you want to read it out loud, or how do you want to do that?
Read it out loud.
I'll read it, sure. Attorney Mackler stated the First Step Act. How is he using it to reduce recidivism and to make a difference for people of color in his community? I've mentioned that I've worked in the criminal justice system as a federal public defender for over 10 years. And during most of that time, we didn't have the benefit of the First Step Act. And unfortunately, as we all know, our criminal justice system disproportionately impacts people of color, and the vast majority of my clients were young Black men. I got to know my clients and their families extremely well because it takes years, truly years, to resolve a case in the federal criminal justice system. And I saw time and time again that these very, very long mandatory minimums and harsh sentencing guidelines were simply destroying families. And in some sense, they reduced recidivism because people didn't get out of jail for the longest period of time. They often died in prison. But we continued this pattern, and I got very tired of seeing it. And so it was truly a blessing when the First Step Act passed. In fact, my client stood up in front of the judge at sentencing and he said that he felt that this was handed down by God because it literally reduced his mandatory minimum from 35 years to 10 years. That's an extraordinary thing. And when we show people a bit of mercy and justice, that does reduce recidivism because people will not respect a criminal justice system that does not respect them. Long sentences that are disproportionate to the crime breed a lack of respect for the law. They don't help to reduce recidivism. We need a criminal justice system that helps put people back on the road to becoming productive members of society. And the First Step Act takes a step in that direction. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kimbrough, there was a question that came up from the very first question from Jimmy Garland. Do you see that? Would you mind stating the question and answering it, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Can't see it, I'm sorry.
Does the candidate agree with schools being open without the federal government providing funds needed for teachers, PPE, etc.? What is the importance in applying science to curbing the effect of COVID-19 across this country? This is a really good question, and I'd like to answer them in reverse order, if I may. The question regarding applying science to what we're going through with COVID-19 is why we're here right now. This is why we're taking 3 steps backward in our fight against COVID-19. It's because Donald Trump did not believe that the disease was real in the first place. Second, when reality set in, he refused to listen to his experts like Dr. Fauci. I just heard a news report the other night that Dr. Fauci is the most believable on COVID-19. This should not be an issue that needs to be polled. This man is an expert on infectious diseases, and we should believe him and take his advice. This is why we're in the situation we are now, with schools reopening in the midst of COVID-19. So we don't let children go to school when they have a fever. When they have a fever, they can't go back to school the next day. But yet, we are letting children go back to school in the midst of a pandemic that has not been fully addressed by our national government. And I do believe that we need to make sure that schools are properly funded. So in the event that they should stay home from school and have to learn at home, they should have the broadband, especially in rural communities, and the computers, the Wi-Fi, everything they need to support their learning in a safe environment, one in which they will not be exposed to COVID-19 and expose other vulnerable populations to COVID-19. And remember, 40 million people lost their jobs and their health insurance. And most of those who were infected by COVID-19 were Black and brown people, and they were senior citizens. This is why I'm running to be your United States Senator, because I'm going to listen to the experts and I'm going to listen to the people, so that we will end people dying from COVID-19 and losing their health insurance.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw, there was a final question from Mr. Garland.
Yes.
Do you mind answering that, please? Stating it first and then answering it, please.
Does the candidate agree with schools being open without the federal government providing funds needed for more teachers, PPE, etc. What is the importance in applying science when curbing the effect of COVID-19 across the country? Well, I was a product of public school, and my son was too. And I'll tie it into COVID-19. He went through a time where he had medical issues, and he needed an independent learning plan to be able to get back on track. Right now, our children have lost so much instructional time. And when we're talking about schools, the first thing I go to is my nieces and nephews and my godchildren that are throughout the neighborhood that call me auntie. And I want to make sure that they're able to get that lost instructional time and get on track for what they need. We are in a pandemic, and our leaders refuse to acknowledge that and put in things to implement in our educational system, in our economic system, and also been trying to roll back environmental laws in the midst of all of this. And so they've still been focusing on the wrong thing, profits before people. In a pandemic, when it comes to education, we need to make sure that each student has access to a high quality education by having wraparound services that they need. That means that our local education authorities are going to need the funding to be able to implement those plans. We say, oh, put a device in every child's hand. But do you know it takes about 18 months to get those devices ready to put in a child's hand, and they come from China. And everybody want them at the same time. So we have a debacle that we have to have leaders who are courageous enough to know that we're in a pandemic and we need to support our society as we recover from this pandemic. If we do not have a cure, that means that we should be doing things to curb the effect and follow the science. It don't take a rocket science to figure that out, that this disease is really easy to get. I have family members that are now diagnosed with COVID-19. The first deaths were people who lived on my block and who had moved away. We already had the pandemic of pollution, poverty, and racism. And all of those intertwined affect Black and brown communities differently. And it also affects Black and brown children differently. And so we should be funding our schools like the same way we fund our military during this pandemic in order to get each child the individual instructional plans that they need with the wraparound services for the teachers, for the educators, and for the parents, all to be successful.
Thank you very much. Now, for all of you, I have one last question, and then this forum will be over. I will start with you, Ms. Kimbrough. Tennessee State and federal, you've alluded to this somewhat in your previous responses, but Tennessee State and federal representatives have a fiduciary responsibility of ensuring that all residents in Tennessee are safe, healthy, and provided a reasonable place of employment and housing. In this position, how would you propose to meet those minimal constitutional objectives?
I'm sorry, I did not. Could you repeat the question, please? I didn't hear it all.
That's okay. Tennessee State and federal representatives have a fiduciary responsibility of ensuring that all residents of Tennessee are safe, healthy, and provide a reasonable place of employment and housing. In this position, how would you propose to meet those minimal constitution objectives?
Right. So when we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, we pledge liberty and justice for all. And this means liberty and justice in housing, in our economy, and being able to work. So I support a living wage. Number one, I will fight to make sure that workers are paid at least $15 an hour or more, people are living on poverty right now. They're having to work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. And oh my goodness, they're probably one of the 40 million that have lost their jobs and their health care because of COVID-19, because the leadership did not believe that it was real. This is why I support Medicare for all, because I believe that one of those human rights is having health care. Because if you don't have health care, how can you enjoy your house or make it to your job? We need to make sure that every American has access to health care without worrying about how to pay it. We need to put an end to housing discrimination, especially when it comes to redlining, so that everyone will have access to adequate, safe housing. We need to make sure that we have enough money to feed our children and to feed those who are hungry. This is why we need to address funding of other departmental entities and fund those social services that are desperately needed by our communities so they can live as humans, so they can live the American dream.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mackler, I'm sorry. You're on mute.
I gotcha. Thank you. On this and in so many ways, Washington is failing Tennessee. Access to health care is a right, and fixing our healthcare system will be my top priority in the Senate. Our state leads the nation in rural hospital closures per person. No one's addressing the opioid epidemic, and the kind of healthcare you get and whether you can get healthcare depends so much on who you are and where you live in Tennessee. We have to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We have to stop our rural hospitals from closing. We have to stabilize the exchanges and bring down healthcare costs. Now, Lamar Alexander had a bipartisan bill with Patty Murray that would have done just that, but it never even got a vote in front of Mitch McConnell's Senate. If our state's gerrymandered supermajority won't expand Medicaid, we need to do that at the federal level. And we have to continue to protect people with pre-existing conditions. There are 1.3 million Tennesseans with pre-existing conditions. They will lose that coverage if Mitch McConnell and his allies, including Bill Hagerty, win the lawsuit that they brought all the way to the Supreme Court to take away coverage during a pandemic. That's just wrong. Healthcare is the #1 issue, and we need to rebuild the middle class. The system is rigged, people are struggling, and we need change that's going to give all Tennesseans the opportunity to achieve the American dream. I've met Tennesseans who haven't gotten a raise in years. They work longer hours, they're still falling further behind. They're deeply worried about their ability to send their kids to school, to save for their retirement, and if Social Security or Medicare will even be there for them. A hard day's work should earn a living wage. Women need equal pay for equal work. And there is an important role for the federal government to play, investing in things like education and infrastructure and clean energy technology. Finally, something that's very important to me personally is service. And by that I mean more than military service, national service. There should be more incentives for service so that young people can get involved in their communities, meet and work with folks they might not otherwise meet, help them pay for college, and learn new skills. Because people who work hard and play by the rules ought to be able to achieve the American dream. We have a lot of work to do.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Ms. Bradshaw?
Well, the people that they're talking about, I am those people. Along with many of my neighbors, I work about 3 jobs. I work in home health care, I sell life insurance, and I also am a consultant as a nonprofit consultant. And so I work 3 jobs, like most people across the state of Tennessee. And when I'm working in home health care, I make less than $15 an hour. I worry each and every day what type of society we are going to have with people working all day and all night. And who's going to watch the children? Who's going to do the things when it comes to arts and recreation? That's the reason why I am running, is because I not only live the issues, but I understand and I listen to people tell me what the issues are. As I have walked across, well, I hadn't walked. I have drove across the state talking to people. I walked from my car to their house probably, but it's just listening to them about what they feel that's important to them. And it's about having healthy and safe communities where people live, learn, work, worship, and recreate. And those 3 pillars that people need, In order to make societies healthy and safe, it starts with an environment with a just transition away from pollution. Because no matter how thriving our economy ever will be, if we cannot breathe the air and we cannot trust the soil and the water, nobody's going to get anywhere fast soon, right? So we have to have an environment, and it's tied to our education, and it's tied to our economy, because the sick society costs more. And we have to have healthcare addressing those disparities to make sure that our system works for hardworking families, that our economic system includes a living wage with a index that increases yearly based on a data-driven formula to make sure that wage is sustainable. And healthcare, it cannot be a commodity. People will be like me with an 80-20 plan. Even though I had a great job in the middle class, an 80-20 plan took me right into bankruptcy. I am that person. I live the issues. And that's the reason why we are having data-driven solutions based on the conversations I've had with people across the state of Tennessee. My name is Marquita Bradshaw, and you can go to my website and read more about the environmental justice platform that was put together and informed by the voters of Tennessee.
Thank you very much, Attorney Kimbrough, Attorney Mackler, and Ms. Bradshaw. We appreciate you very much for showing up on this evening. That was the final question. If you have any last words, you have 30 seconds where you can state whatever you want. I'll start with Ms. Bradshaw since your mic is unmuted.
Okay. You were going in and out again. I need you to repeat it.
Giving you a last 30 minutes if you wanted to say something.
30 seconds.
30
seconds?
I said 30 minutes. No.
I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to talk that long. Oh, wow.
Forgive me, 30 seconds. Forgiveth me.
Well, my name is Marquita Bradshaw, and I live the issues like most people across the state of Tennessee. And we want to change. Hard-working families want a true pathway out of poverty, have access to health care, and have an educational system that works for all of our children. We have an opportunity to make systematic change with people that's not only talking about the hot-button issues, but pushing beyond that. And if you go to my website, you'll be able to read more about the platforms that were put together by talking to people across the state of Tennessee. You can go to marquitabradshaw.com and cast your vote for the best choice and the first choice on the ballot, Marquita Bradshaw.
Thank you very much. Attorney Mackler.
Well, thank you again so much for having me. There's too much at stake to lose sight of what we're fighting for in this election. On issue after issue, Washington's failing Tennessee. Rural hospital closures, opioids, the trade war. You throw in COVID-19, there's a perfect storm gathering in Tennessee. People want change, and we can win this U.S. Senate seat if we're prepared to seize the initiative. Our choice this year is to send another Marsha Blackburn to the Senate, and that's exactly what Bill Hagerty's pledged to be, or we can make a change. Bredesen got 44% last cycle. That means we need 6 points more in a presidential year. I got in this race early because there's a lot of work to do to get those 6 points. My campaign is and always has been about meeting Tennesseans where they live and listening to what they need and aren't getting from Washington. I'm so honored that people like Leader Karen Kemper, Governor Bredesen have endorsed my campaign, and that thousands of individuals in all 95 counties have invested personally in sending better leadership to Washington. My track record of service appeals to voters all across the state of Tennessee. We need to make sure that story is told. So go to jamesmackler.com, sign up for the campaign, volunteer, share things about this campaign on social media, and donate what you can. I'm asking for your vote on August 6th and again in November, because we will win this open Senate seat when everyone wanting change joins the team to make it happen. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Attorney Kimbrough.
Leadership is supposed to fight for democracy, equality, liberty, and justice. Our Republican leadership has chipped away at the very foundation of these principles. I'm running for this seat because, in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, just like I am, I want you to vote for me. for your United States Senate seat. Bill Haggerty says he's been endorsed by Donald Trump. But I want you to know the most important endorsement you can ever have is being endorsed by the people. And that's what it's going to take to flip this seat. The Republicans have already outspent us. We need somebody that has what money can't buy, and that's me. I have the energy, the skills, the tenacity, and the faith to beat the Republican nominee. I'm asking that you vote for me right now, or starting early voting on July 17th, or definitely on August 6th. Passion for Tennessee. Visit my website at robinforsenate.com.
Thank you all again very much. We appreciate you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, just like Jimmy stated in the beginning, everybody is invited to these forums, no matter what your political background is. It's just who chooses to come that's who's here. So I'll turn it over to Jimmy. And again, we thank you very much for this evening.
Well, as the president of the Clarksville branch and vice president for Middle Tennessee, we appreciate you taking the time to come and be with us. Integrity, skills, all of this is going to come to play. Whichever one get the seat, there's going to be a lot of work to do. Education is the moral currency of the United States of America. If you don't have a good education, you don't have anything. And one of the things that I challenge people when I go to Washington, D.C., I come up there once a year in January just to talk to you, whichever one going to be there, about funding for schools, about the internet divide, about making sure that there's dollars in the budget to make sure that all of our children, those that are laying on a stretcher as well as walking into the classroom, can be taken care of. I have enjoyed this, both forums. I enjoyed both forums. All of you are quality candidates, and we definitely wish you the best, each of you. Only one of you in each group can win. But the bottom line is I want you to know that as far as I'm concerned, you are all class agents to be representative of the state of Tennessee, and you will do as well. God bless you. God keep you. This is the end of our forum for the night. We appreciate you coming out. And good night.
Thank you.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.